All right, I will start by calling roll. Amin Tomez.
Here.
Thank you. Cindy Cox. Cindy, you're muted.
Here.
Try again. Okay, thank you. And Cindy, in order to be present, your video does have to be showing. All right, we'll give you a second there. Martha Banda.
Present.
Thank you. George Garcia.
Present.
Rita Brodigam.
Here.
Karen Spear. Kathy Davis.
Here.
Val Moore.
Here.
Katie Jarl.
Here.
Susan Belden.
Here.
Sally Scott. Marilyn Gottbetter. Heber Lefton.
Here.
And David McCary.
Here.
All right, Madam Chair, we have a quorum. Oh, Rita, you are muted.
Okay, thanks, Chase. The time now is 6:34. The animal care appointed by City Council. Brodigam, Chair, and the Vice Chair is Susan Belden. It is the function of the board to assist and advise the City of San Antonio regarding animal care services through recommendations, reports, and by representing ACS in the community and within our assigned council districts. Members of the public can watch this meeting through YouTube by clicking on the link on the agenda or listen to the meeting through audio only by calling 415-655-0001. Again, 415-655-0001 and using access code 177-606-1694. Again, 177-606-1694. This meeting is being recorded. At this time, I will ask ACS staff to provide additional instructions for tonight's meeting. Chase?
All right, thank you, Rita. So we have 3 items for consideration on the agenda and no public comments tonight. No comments were submitted for this evening's meeting. As a reminder, we ask that you keep yourselves muted unless you are speaking. If a board member would like to speak, then please unmute yourself, state your name, and then briefly pause before proceeding. This will allow us to make sure we know who is speaking at all times and that we are not speaking over one another. We ask you to refrain from using the chat tool and keep all comments on the record. After the presentation of each item, board members can discuss the item and ask any follow-up questions to the presenter. Then we will open the floor to motions. We ask that any board member who is making a motion first do so by stating your name and then proceeding with the motion. All voting will be done by roll call. When we call your name, unmute your microphone, indicate your vote, and then mute yourself. And with that, we are ready to view the agenda. And Rita, it's back to you. Rita, I believe you're muted.
Does any board member wish to pull any of these items for individual consideration? I don't see anyone, Chase.
Sorry,
We are
Rita,
now.
also, hey, Rita, this is Heber.
Yeah.
Also, just to remind everybody that if you don't want to poll anything, but you want to make a comment, or if you have any questions on anything in the consent agenda, this is the time to do so, to ask those questions now.
Just real quickly, from my perspective, Alyssa did get a chance a few hours ago to send a update to one of the items that was included in the board packet for this meeting. The contract update, unfortunately, was sent out originally with some incorrect years listed, causing some confusion. So the update that she sent did address that.
See anybody's hands raised on this?
No, I don't.
So we are now ready to proceed with a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
This is Kathy Davis. I would move we accept the consent agenda.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there a second?
Yes.
No
This
more,
is
I
Amin
second.
Tomas. I second that.
To approve the consent agenda, which has been seconded, I call for a vote. Chase, can you please do the roll call on the vote?
Absolutely. Amin Tomas,
Yay.
Cindy Cox,
Aye.
Martha Banda, thank you, Martha. George Garcia,
Yay.
thank you, George. Rita Brodigan,
Yes.
Karen Spear,
Yes.
Kathy Davis,
Yes.
thank you. Val Moore,
Yes.
Katie Jarl,
Yes.
thank you. Susan Belden,
Yes.
thank you. And Sally Scott, still not here. All right, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, Rita, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Next item up for consideration are the proposed revisions to the Animal Care Services Advisory Board facility inspections. I'm now going to turn that over to Kathy Davis to present. Kathy?
Thank you, Rita. You should have just today received the checklists that we have reviewed, and the recommendations are contained inside those. What I'd first like to do is a couple things. I'd certainly like to thank the committee for their time and contributions. The board members that served on the facility checklist committee are George Garcia, Sally Scott, and Susan Belden. And I'd also like to extend our thanks to the staff members that assisted us, Cynthia Martinez and Chelsea Arch. They were both really great at helping us in a very tedious job of revising all of these inspection checklists. And we really appreciate all of the effort that they put into it and their attention to detail, because there were certainly plenty of them to be considered. I will tell you as an introduction that we initially discussed the purpose for the inspections. While the inspections are mandated by City Ordinance Article 2, Section 5-26, the ordinance doesn't really provide any guidance as to what or how or why we are to inspect the city-owned facilities. So consequently, we propose that the purpose of the inspections is to improve the functional areas of the shelters and to ensure that animals and customers are treated and cared for appropriately. So with that thought, we then began our work towards revising these checklists. And a few general housekeeping items are included in our recommendations. We recommend that 2 people should be assigned to perform the inspections of the 151 facility, primarily because it's a very large facility. The board inspections should be performed after the facilities are open to the public to better gauge the results of the cleaning process, which plays a large part in the inspections. And that staff should provide feedback to the board on any checklist item where improvements, corrections, or clarification is needed. Also, when a board member cannot inspect an item, for instance, there's a specific item that asks if the cleaning tools are disinfected at the end of the day. We felt that if a board member was not able to do that because of the timing of their inspection, then they should select a staff member and quiz him or her on how or when the cleaning of the tools were disinfected. So that obviously we were making sure we did our level best to find out whether staff was aware of how that item was to be completed, if we obviously couldn't see it. We also noted that certainly a staff member should not be asked or quizzed those kinds of questions if they're currently assisting a customer or if they're in surgery or doing some other task that they should not be pulled away from. But our mission was to obviously make sure that as much as possible that we are addressing each of the items on the checklist. And finally, overall, what we just determined was that all the checklists should be uniform in their requirements. In other words, we should not require the kennels at ADL, for instance, to have a higher standard than the kennels at 151. That all of the standards should be uniform and consistent across all of the facilities. You will note that we've changed the look of the forms to allow for additional space for comments adjacent to the items that are being inspected. It's our desire to allow those comments to be made by the item for clarification to staff when an item needs to be addressed or praise needs to be rendered. And finally, after the board has had an opportunity to review our recommendations on the checklist, we would hope to put them into practice and then review them again in a few months down the road to see if any additional changes need to be made or whether there's a modification to the form that would ease or assist board members in performing the process. With that being said, again, my deep thanks to both staff and the board members that served. We certainly would like all the board members to take their time to review the checklist. Since they were only sent out today, we don't expect or request a motion for your approval tonight. We would recommend that you take the time to look at these checklists, review them at your leisure, and that they be brought back to the board at the next meeting for your questions, recommendations, any concerns that you have, and we can address them at the next board meeting. And that pretty much concludes our presentation. I don't know if Susan or Sally have anything that they'd like to add at this time to our process.
Well, I would like to welcome Sally, and I can see everyone at the moment. So if anybody has any questions or comments, just wave, and happy to give you the floor.
Right, yeah, I've got a question just for clarification. Kathy, can you go back and just what the instruction on about talking to questioning staff of what the procedure was for that again?
Yes, our hope was obviously to have interaction between the board member and a staff person. If the item is something that the board member cannot physically see because of the timing of that process, or needs some kind of assistance or clarification as to whether that item is being completed. So rather than marking it unable to review or unable to see, or timing is wrong on the checklist, the hope for outcome is that we could ask a board member, when do you normally clean your surgical tools, or how is that procedure done? And get a fairly quick response from the staff member as to how that's completed. That would give the board member some comfort level that the employees certainly know when and how that item is to be completed. And it's certainly also our intention not to pull them away from their duties for any period of time, anything more than for a very short response. So it's not to burden the employee, but it's to do as much as possible to ensure that those items are being completed either at a different time of day or that so that we don't have to mark couldn't see it on the inspection checklist.
Right. I would like to, just for operational purposes, as well as to protect board members, as well as protect staff, if we can add in somewhere along the line where it's not just randomly talking to somebody or a staff member, but maybe direction from either the manager on site to be able to, if you want to talk to a staff member. I'm not concerned about this board, but I am thinking in terms of what if there's any changes or what if something happens. There have been in the long history of ACS some occurrences where either staff felt threatened or there was some concern about that conversation. I want to be able to protect staff. I don't want to hide anything. I want to make everything available to the board members, but at the same time, I want to be able to protect the staff so that they don't feel like they're being questioned by the President of the United States as, or somebody in high authority as I've instructed my staff to view each and every one of you as such. And so I don't know if we can just make a tweak to that component to be able to make sure that we can get you to the right person versus just randomly picking somebody that's operating.
Heber, I think that's a good point. I think it might be helpful if we hold that until our next discussion and we can look at these items that we have in there individually to see which ones you may have some concerns on, and maybe we asterisk those off. Most of what we have in this in the new checklist, I think we've taken out some of the ambiguity that might have been there before, and I think what we're looking for is basically more basic kinds of things, not things that are intricate, not things that are beyond the scope of what a board member might even understand they should be looking for. Because I think there were a few things, and Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, that were on that list that we didn't even know what they were completely talking about. So your point's well taken, Heber, and I think we'll, if it's okay with you, we'll hold that thought until the next time, and then we can look at any and all of the comments that are made, and then we can take that back to a further meeting to change whatever needs to be changed or to alter it. I certainly don't want staff to be felt like they're in a position that they're not comfortable. You know, they certainly shouldn't have to answer something if they're not comfortable with responding to somebody. But we're, I think it bears looking at the checklist as to the recommendations that are on there.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Kathy, if I could, just as a matter of procedure, and I'm sorry I missed this part of what you said. I know you're not asking for a motion tonight, but what is your plan or proposal for soliciting feedback, incorporating that, and presenting, I guess, a final set of documents? What are you asking the board to do?
We are asking at this point for the board to take the items that were emailed to them today. There should be 4 different checklists. They're rather lengthy because of the space that we've allowed for comments, but to take those back and review them at their leisure, and then that this item would be back on the agenda for the next meeting. I think it would be kind of a disservice to the board members to try and rush through probably, I don't know, 40, 50 pages worth of checklists in the meeting tonight and hope for a good outcome. So I would much prefer that we take some time and look at them, since all of us will be hands-on these documents when it's our turn to go do that specific inspection.
Got it. Thank you for that. All right. Anyone else with any questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any. Since we're not asking for a motion, Rita, the floor is yours. And you're muted.
Good.
There you go.
I will get this by the end of it, you know. The next item up for consideration are the proposed revisions to this Animal Care Services Advisory Board statistical reporting strategy. I'm going to turn it now over to Cindy Cox to present.
Okay, thank you, Rita. Today, a little bit earlier, Heber sent out our report, the synopsis of what we've been doing. And first, I would like to thank Martha Banda, Susan Belden, who are the committee members and who did such a great job of looking at the reports as they are now, identifying some areas where we might really like to see a little bit more insight. And then, of course, Heber and his team, who not only helped us visualize what was kind of conceptual, put it into a great report, and then made some excellent refinements. We're very excited about what we're presenting to you tonight because I think it helps us to really get a handle on or to kind of know what's going on in some areas that have been we've had recent briefings on, we've had concerns about. I think that kind of brings those up to the forefront. So looking at the attachment the report that in summary that Heber sent out a little bit earlier, we kind of looked at three different areas. First, I want to comment that City Code requires that that the ACS Advisory Board submit quarterly reports to the city manager concerning the Animal Care Services Program. And those are the ones that we get every time we meet. They're in, listed in the under the 4 strategic priorities: increase live release rate, control stray roaming population, enhanced enforcement, and engaging and educating the community. So we started with those reports. We also looked at if there should be maybe more frequent reports on maybe a streamlined number of topics. Again, those that have been of concern or that we've received recent briefings on, like puppy sales, like the number of spay neuters, the enforcement of that part of the code and that sort of thing. And after a lot of discussion and a lot of help from Heber on how that might work, we have these recommendations. So first, and I'm kind of jumping in the middle first because that's a little bit easier. Looking at the quarterly annual reports, which are what we usually get during the advisory board, and which is what is posted on the ACS website under the reports and statistics page. We did recommend a couple of additional reports to be added that help give a little more insight into the 4 strategic priorities and how we're coming along in achieving those priorities. Under increased live release rate, we're recommending a report on average length of stay for animals. Because that is an area, has been for a long time an area of concern or interest anyway. Under controlling stray roaming population, we're recommending that we include a report number of cases pending spay neuter requirement compliance, because that is an area that comes up often. Of the roaming animals where the owner is ticketed, how many of them are actually following through on getting their animals spay neutered. And enhanced enforcement on calls for service requirements by priority type, because obviously that's a
I'm sorry, is it just me or are others having trouble hearing? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of. Cindy, I'm
No,
sorry.
it's just you, Chase. It's just
Okay. So Cindy, I'm sorry, you're breaking up there. Your audio was just fine, and then you kind of dropped off.
Okay.
So Cindy, we lost you. We lost you right when you started talking about the control the stray population.
Oh, okay. The report compliance, in other words, for roaming animals that are either return to owner infield or over the, asked that ACS track how many and then under we're looking at we requested in a couple of different areas under call response rate, and then in the roadside sales, the puppy sales, how many for illegal puppy sales, areas of real concern of ours. And again, included in the quarterly annual reports, and approves it, and it'll be made available to the on the ACS website.
I'm sorry, Cindy. Can you hold on just a second? Yeah,
Sure.
it's cutting out every other second. Rita or Heber, do you have a suggestion on how to proceed? We could just take a brief pause and see if Cindy could perhaps call in. We could also see if one of the other committee members has the ability to take over some of the briefing. But I want to make sure that this information is communicated clearly.
Is there another?
So Cindy, what do you feel comfortable doing? Do you want to just call in and finish it?
A visual, but maybe since I've been visual already. Wow, that's painful. If I could call in, that would be great.
Okay, Cindy, actually, I don't know how this works from the. Sorry, whew. I don't know how this works from a open meetings perspective, but I think if you turn off your video, that may save your bandwidth and would allow your voice to come through a little bit clearer. So we could perhaps try that for a little bit.
Okay, that sounds great.
Chase, I just had something I wanted to add.
Yes, Martha.
Is there any way you can share this screen of the document she's referring to?
I believe so. Doreen, there's no issue, especially since Cindy's now no longer visible with me showing the document in her place.
Since you have that document, or do you want me to pop it up?
I do. I can pop it up. Well, actually, Heber, if you want to. All right, there we go. Cindy, are you still there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, hey, you sound very nice.
Is it any better?
It does sound good.
Okay. I don't know what it is. The video just makes it so difficult.
All right, let's give it a shot.
Okay. So I've gone over the quarterly, and I don't know if we can make the page on the right a little larger, because those are everybody received a copy of that, and I realized that there might be that it's reasonable to think that you want to take some time and kind of review it and decide if you want to approve it. I will say that it's the beginning of the fiscal year still pretty much, and since these statistics are going to be being presented going forward, if we can get even just some general feedback tonight, then right now a lot of it is being kind of hand done by Heber's team, which is really time intensive. And if you guys want to wait to approve it till the next meeting, that's fine. But maybe some potential feedback so they can start working on getting the IT guys to figure out how to do this, a little more a little more easily rather than being done, hand done. Okay, so those items in red for the second page of the attachment that Heber sent you late morning today are the ones that we're recommending that we add to those quarterly and annual reports that we see and are become part of the consent. The things that we review every time we meet are right there. So in addition to those, and can we go to the second page, the next page after that, please, where we start to look at the graphics. Okay, so in addition to that, we are recommending the ad hoc reporting committee in consultation with ACS recommends that ACS provide to the ACS advisory board membership by mail first a link to the last month's Asilomar report, which will also be on the ACS website, and then an graphic rich summary of our prior monthly performance, which we will have available to us in English and Spanish. I don't know if we can make this any larger. We love this report. This report gives really kind of the basics, which are so helpful in whether you're talking to your council member or to a member of the public about some of hitting the real highlights on what's going on at ACS. The number of service requests, the shelter intake, pet placement results by different categories, and then a summary of the numbers. How many roaming citations were issued? How many pets were killed on the streets, which is, part of controlling the stray roaming population, highlights that. How many stray neuter surgeries were performed? And then there's a QR code that they can scan with their cell phone, or you can too, to get more information. So we love this high-level infographic, which gives just a lot of information in a short amount of space. So that would be one thing that we would receive each month. Again, this is perfect if you're meeting with your council member to show to him or her. And then next, Heber, the ACS Advisory Board Monthly Statistical Report. Yes. There is a lot in here, and I know you guys might want to spend a little bit of time looking at it. But this, again, gives additional insight into some areas that we've had briefings and kind of highlighted some areas that ACS is working on hard. Like the service request received by different priority levels. And then there's a little table over to the right that identifies what those priority levels are. The compliance rate in each of those priority, how well are they doing to meeting the time that's identified? What's the historical average and what are the actuals? More information again on the shelter intake, how long there's domestic pets are staying, how many are in the shelter. This data is as of, again, it's monthly, so this is as of October 2020. How many citations were issued and by type, and roaming, rabies, microchip. It's some really great information, again, to help us kind of understand what's going on and maybe ask some other questions to help our understanding. On the next page, under strategic priority 2, increasing the live release rate, the pet placement how many and what category, and then by percent. And we have a historic average, like the last 3 years versus actual, so we can see, how does this year compare to our historic averages. And then over on the right, some nice big graphics, numbers on, what percent found homes, or what number found homes, and what percent were euthanized. What's our live release rate? And then under the next strategic priority, controlling the stray animal population, spay neuter surgeries, and the death by vehicles. And then some new stuff that we asked for a little bit more information on. How many microchips have been implanted? And then something that we've talked about a lot, that mandatory spay neuter ordinance data. Now, this information is as of October 1st, 2019. How many total pets have been returned to owner? And then it kind of gives a breakdown on, of those that were not exempt from getting their pets spayed or neutered, of those roaming pets, how many are still pending, breakdown, to again give us some insight on what's going on in this area, which I think is really important. So anyway, this will be coming out to us once a month. We really are interested in your feedback on, we talked about a lot of different areas that have been briefed to the ACS Advisory Board. And these were the ones that we thought kept coming up again and again, with either concerns or a need for additional information or some drill down. And so we're very interested in, if you have any feedback tonight, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I give you a chance to take a look at it, and we can get it approved at the next meeting. But if you guys think that these are some areas that look good to you, then Heber and his team can start working with the IT folks and making the pulling of this data a little bit easier. So Martha or Susan, did you have any other comments, or Heber?
This is Valmore. I have a question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
What is exempt from spay neuter requirement? Is that like elderly dogs?
Want me to take that, Heber?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, go ahead, Chen.
Okay. So we've got a few different exemptions. Some of them may be because of medical exemptions, age, weight, different things like that. A lot of them, what we find is we'll have like bite exemptions. So let's say an animal that has to come to our facility or gets confiscated from us, it's not necessarily one that was roaming free of restraint. So it's not required by law to be spayed and neutered. So it may be an animal that we brought here under a confiscation, not under a free of restraint. That's a lot of them that we see, Val.
Okay, so if you confiscate them, then don't they belong to ACS and they get spayed or neutered before they get placed?
Right, but these are confiscations, like, again, associated with a bite. We bring it here, we quarantine it, but we have to turn it back over to them after the quarantine. Or if we confiscate them for an investigation and then they receive the animals back because it was an unfounded investigation or things like that. And then there are also the medical exemptions, things like that.
Yeah. So Val, you raised a good point, and I believe Cindy actually asked the same question to me earlier.
Yeah.
But you're right. So the ordinance gives us the authority to require spayed and neutered if the dog is found roaming free of restraint. So if a dog is in the front yard, it's not on a leash, and it bites somebody, it gets quarantined at ACS, and we can require that dog be spayed and neutered. However, we also deal with, if you have a dog that scratches you inside the house, but the dog was not up to date on its rabies vaccination, by state law, it has to be quarantined at our facility or quarantined by ACS, which requires an impoundment, that then once the quarantine period is over, it gets returned. But the dog was where it was supposed to be when we impounded it. And so that means that that dog is not, we cannot require that dog to be spayed and neutered.
Okay, I'm just surprised it's almost a third of the total numbers. That's a large number.
Well, I mean, we are, that is what we do. I mean, we are the rabies control authority. And so we do get dogs that come in that were bitten where the dogs were supposed to be. So if a dog bites a child inside the house or in the backyard, we have to deal with those pets as well. So yeah, there is a portion of that, but those are exempt.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. No, Val, I had, like Heber said, that was the first thing I asked. I said, okay, Heber, this is like a third of them. I need to understand this. And so, yeah, exactly right. So
Now, I do want to just jump in and just clarify the difference between the two reports. Is one that I'll refer to as the infographic. The infographic will represent the data for that month, and that infographic will be sent to you in a picture format to make it easy for you to post onto social media, to forward to your council member, to be included in his or her monthly newsletter, or however way that you want to be able to share that. But the data represents what took place just in that month. The ACS Advisory Board monthly, it's more of an internal document. It's intended to be given to people who understand a little bit more about what's going on with ACS. And it's more of me reporting to you or me sharing with you what's going on. Obviously, the information can be used in your conversations with other people. But this report, the intent of it is not to be distributed out to everybody. But the other difference is that this report is going to be not monthly, it's going to be year to date. So you'll see these numbers from the first month of the year continually to grow, because this will give you where are we year to date on these metrics.
right, exactly. Thank you, Heber. Those are good points. Really good points.
Okay, so I am seeing some questions. George.
I have a recommendation.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to see on that report the number of cases that are in adjudication and what was resolved with them.
Okay. So that would be under the
Enforcement, enhanced.
under the enforcement.
George, I will tell you that, to be honest with you, that information will be very difficult to get, just for the fact that the adjudication is a separate division or separate department that we don't oversee that aspect of it. So again, if we're talking about, I'm assuming you're not talking about the civil citations or you're talking about more of the criminal citation side. That is something where we will build a case, a cruelty case, that may take us a month, and then we pass it over to the county attorney's office to be able to decide when they're going to adjudicate it or how they're going to adjudicate it. And so that is a system that we don't necessarily have the availability to dive in and to pull that data on a regular basis.
So we don't know how many cases are filed.
So if most of these citations we're talking about on a city side, and so if we issue a citation, we're going to have a ruling. We're going to be able to know that because it's either they showed up to court and it was resolved, or it was a no-show and they have to come into compliance based upon the court. But I'm assuming normally the terminology of adjudication is referring to the bigger cases that are sent to the county prosecuting attorney's office, which is actually not even a city organization. It's in the county. And so they're the ones, we are responsible for investigating the case. We take responsibility in building the case file. And then once that case file is built, we then hand it over to the prosecuting attorneys, who then have the responsibility to decide which cases that they're going to prosecute and which cases they are not, and when they are going to prosecute that case. And so that aspect of the adjudication is something that we really don't, ACS does not have control over.
Then, but you have the data, you have data on how many you filed, right, for the month or?
Correct. So the quarterly report will provide that of how many cruelty cases we filed, we investigated, and we filed for to the attorney's office. So that's there. That section that talks about the citation will include a lot of that information. How many citations we issued. But like for instance, the civil citation, we're usually about 60 days out before they go to the city court. When we talk about the misdemeanors, Shannon, how far? Those are ones where we don't even set the court date.
Yeah,
That we issue the citation, and then we report that information to the court, and then the court will send a letter to the person notifying them when the next time will be that they'll be able to stand in front of a judge. So we don't have that knowledge in ACS. And so oftentimes when we are getting that information, we're pulling as many favors as we can.
To put it into perspective, George, there was a case we filed 2 years ago, and I think it was one that we were actually working with Val on, and we were trying to find out a status of it. The courts didn't even accept the case for prosecution until a month before the 2-year statute of limitations. And now the case itself may go on for another 6 months, 8 months, however long, depending upon resets and whatever legal activities, whatever legal actions their lawyers take.
So when we take a look at the responsibility that Animal Care Services plays in this big global picture, we are responsible for addressing, we are responsible for building the case, we are responsible for citation. But after we do that, it's a different organization that is responsible for carrying it out.
Right. And I think that I've discussed that with at one time with Council Villagran, not just concerning Animal Care Services, but other cases that are code, municipal code violations, to see who was tracking them. And it seems to me like the tracking is lacking. And then when you have a case like Shannon just said, 2 years down the road, well, what happened to that case? Why did it take so long? And I think that the councilwoman should know that our judicial system is not working the way it's supposed to be working.
So I would politely argue that the judicial system very well may be working the way it's supposed to work. Remember, when we take a look at the level of offense, we do have that control on the lower offense level. But when we get into the cases, the big cases like cruelty or where we're talking about jail time, it's intended that in the government, you have the 3 branches: legislative, judicial, and executive. And so Animal Care Services follows the executive side where we are administering the rules. And then once we do what we do, then we pass it over to a separate entity that is supposed to, by principle, operate independent from the executive or the administrative branch. And so I respect and I know that sometimes these cases can be very frustrating. And you're right, it can be frustrating with animal care services, with code, and with others, with police department. I'm sure that the police department gets frustrated as well by a lot of these things. But I am assuming that the founding fathers purposely intended for it to be like that in order to be able to protect the rights of the general public.
Yeah, okay, and that's fine. And then on your priority 5, I've got a little concern on that, on the priority 5, because, I know it doesn't have a high priority on it, but when you call in, when a person calls in, and I've done it, you call in and you say, okay, there's a stray at this location, and the 311 operator tells you, okay, Mr. Garcia, what we're going to do is we'll send it over to ACS, and they gather the information, and then they do a sweep. And that's why the person that calls gets frustrated, because they say, oh, they're not going to do nothing about it. So that's just one of the concerns that I have. And then the animals, the dogs and cats that are killed on our highways, not on city streets. I'm talking about the highways. TxDOT. I call when I see a dog dead on the highways. I call TxDOT. Do you collect that information from TxDOT? All the animals that they pick up on the highways?
We do not.
Yeah.
So George, remember that the metric that we utilize of the death by vehicle, that metric that we are utilizing, we're not necessarily providing information to the public of here are all the deaths, because it's also not including those that die on the street, that some good Samaritan chooses to dispose of the remains on their own or independently, or it does not take into account if your dog is in the front yard and gets hit, but you know it's your dog, and so you choose to take it and get the dog cremated or buried or whatever, that it's not recording that information. So the death by vehicle metric is not intended as a metric to report all the deaths that are happening in San Antonio. The purpose of that metric is to give us an indicator of what is going on. It is what's referred to as an outcome metric, not an output metric, because it gives us a chance to be able to see what's generally happening. And so what we're watching is not necessarily the exact numbers, we're watching the trends, because the trend of what's going gives us one insight on what's happening in the community. And so if we're seeing a trend of that number going down, and then we also see a trend of the number of bites that are going down, then that gives us an assumption or the ability to assume that something positive is happening in the community. Whereas if we start seeing a trend of those numbers going increase, then we need to start asking what's happening, why is it going on, so that we can then make policy or operational decisions. So I respect that the death by vehicle metric does not give us an accurate number, of all the deaths that are happening. And you're right, I don't know what it is, but the metric is not intended to tell us how many are dying. It's intended to give us a high level view of what's going on in the community over time.
Right. Yeah, because I know that in my area, District 3, we have a lot of streets that are unpopulated, and I constantly have to call 311 and report a dead animal that was dumped in our area, and solid waste comes and picks it up.
And that's where the data is getting. So that's what this is showing, is the metric is showing the requests that are being sent to 311, where that results in the solid waste department of the city going in and collecting that information or collecting that animal. So that's what this information is showing. But it's a snapshot. It's kind of like when you do a survey. You're not going, if we do a survey for the city of San Antonio, the survey, we're not going into everybody's home, but we are getting a general population of what's happening throughout the city. to give us an understanding of what's going on. And that's the intent of the death by the vehicle metric. It's not to tell us or not to report how many animals are being hit by a car, because we all know that that number is higher. But it is useful in giving us kind of like a direction, an understanding of the direction that the community is going.
Yeah. Well, I want to give kudos to Cindy. The items that were that they want provided is, I think it's a good thing.
Well, Margin, and thanks to the team, and Heber, great work. Thank you.
Hey, Heber, one thing I wanted to ask you. When a dog is hit by a car and solid waste goes out there to pick it up, do they scan it for a microchip and contact the owner that the dog is deceased?
So the policy, as of last year at least, the policy is that they do have microchip scanners to be able to identify. Now, as for them calling the owner, Chase, I don't think that they are actually calling the owner. I think that are providing a list somewhere of here are the microchips.
Yeah, Heber, I can speak to that. So, it was about a year ago. I worked with the live release team at ACS as well as solid waste, and we drafted a letter that both departments were comfortable with on just more or less generic City of San Antonio letterhead. And in the event that solid waste does come across a dead animal with a microchip on the street, there is a process in place for them to communicate that microchip number to ACS. We will track down the associated owner with that microchip, the same as we would for any other pet. And then at that point would send a letter notifying the owner that, the pet that was previously associated with them was found deceased.
Thank you.
All right. So earlier, I think I saw a few more hands with questions. Kathy.
Thanks, Chase. Just a couple questions, more for clarification. On the Appendix C, the shelter inventory number there of 749, is that an end of the month inventory number?
Yeah, so that would be representing the inventory at the end of the month.
Okay. Should there be a beginning inventory number?
We can add it. I mean, it is, just so you reference, it is part of the Asilmar report, but we could add it to this.
Okay. And you answered my question on that being cumulative. I would have a small suggestion on Appendix A. And that would be on, since this is a public document, on the middle section where it says euthanize due untreatable health/behavioral issues, I would just add euthanize due to.
Okay.
That's a point of clarification. Yeah. And then, sorry, the English teacher in me, in the box at the bottom on the left-hand side, it says, save your pets, PET apostrophe S lives. It should be PETS apostrophe.
Okay.
Sorry. Good point.
No, you're good.
That's good.
Oh, and I'm sorry, one more. Just for consideration, I don't know that this is splitting hairs or whatever, but on the euthanize due to need for space, I would just, for your consideration, think about changing that to lack of space. Again, just for clarification, I don't know if that's, just me or whatever, but.
No, that's...
And then I did have an overall question on these, and it's more for staff. I think the graphics page is really great. I think that's a tremendous opportunity to help folks really understand rather than trying to read a bunch of fine print or look at a bunch of charts. But my question for staff is, how much additional staff time will it take you to do that? To format all these reports, get all the numbers, all of that stuff together. I mean, is this a huge challenge or a big increase in somebody's job description to be able to produce and manage these reports on a monthly basis?
Okay, good question, Kathy. In regards to the infographic, we did have that conversation with the ad hoc committee, where it is going to be understood that now if the board keeps on coming back to me and say, I'd like to change this or I'd like to change that, I'd like to be able to, instead of showing this, show that. And if the board is keep on asking for modifications, yes, that is going to consume a lot of time because we're talking about the changing design. What is being recommended here from the committee is that the design is going to remain the same from 1 month to another month, with the difference of the color scheme may change. So, for example, October maybe is yellow, November may be orange, December may be green. I'm not sure, but the color scheme changes, but the design remains the same, which means that all that we have to do is just update the numbers. And so our intent is that this hopefully will save us time because we are getting the information out, and hopefully will result in us having to respond less to emails that are coming in. And instead I can just forward a picture that says, here's the status. In regards to the monthly report that we provide to you in the Appendix C, the ACS Advisory Board, the design of it does take a lot of time, which is kind of what we've talked about. We're optimistic that as we fine tune this report and get it, that we can work with ITSD to create an automatic report. So all I have to do that connects directly into our Chameleon database and automate it. So the intent is that as eventually for us to get to the point where all I'll have to do is have like Cynthia go into Chameleon or go into another system, type in the month, and the data will self-populate. That's the ideal situation. So if we follow the outline as recommended by the subcommittee, it's going to be extremely manageable. However, if we find ourselves as a board every week saying, hey, can we make this change? And can we adjust this one? Or tell me more about this? Then absolutely. Then at that point, as a director, I may have to turn to the board and say, I can't. I got to save animals. So, but right now, as it's outlined, we're kind of already providing this information. It's more of just condensing it into one form and providing it to you.
And just to be clear then, Heber, there's no hard costs connected with doing these insofar as you don't need to go to Chameleon and have them reformat something in Chameleon to get it to spit out these numbers, or ITSD for that matter. There's no hard costs to ACS.
So far, I mean, the design work is now already done. We spent a lot of time on the design work. If we make no changes, then basically this is a Word document that my staff once a month would have to go in and just update the numbers. The ideal situation, we have licenses in a software called Power BI that is already currently connected to Chameleon that we believe will be able to automatically create this with the graphs and everything with the existing resources. Yes, there's going to be some kind of like there was the time that we spent on the initial design. There's going to still need to be some upfront costs of time that's associated with taking the design and transferring it into an automatic system. So yeah, there is going to be a little bit of that cost in terms of time. But once it's completed, there's no, I don't perceive there to be any costs.
Thank you, Heber. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, Karen, I see you've got a question.
Heber, the previous one with the little, the previous one, not this one. Will this be put on the ACS website on Facebook?
Are you talking about the this one right here?
Yes, the Appendix A.
Yeah. So the intent of that one is that we will post it to our website. I believe that we'll post to the website and we'll send to you that you can post to your. We'll post it to our Facebook and our social media accounts, and we'll send it to you to that so you can post it as well. There's not the intent of storing it on our website. We can, but the strategy right now is we just want to provide the most up-to-date information. If somebody wants to see the statistical information, that is where the Asilmar reports come in, and that is where the quarterly reports will come in.
Yeah, because I would probably, I mean, once I get it, I would post it on the Facebook pages I manage, and then the other groups, I would post it into the other groups.
Yeah, and that's when we talk about the intent of these reports, that's what the intent of this infographic is to give to you something that you can post to your social media, that you can send to your council members so they can post it, and to allow those people that you network with to post it on their social media sites so that people can get a high-level review of what we are doing here at ACS.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Heber, can I add something to that, please?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that, one of the purposes for doing this was to do just a snapshot of what's going on at ACS for even people who aren't familiar with what ACS does. It's sort of giving them a glimpse or a snapshot with information that's pretty basic, that's understandable. And then if they want more information, they can go onto the website and look up other information.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Susan. And it, so often if people look at the Asilmar report, they're not really sure even what they're looking at. This is the basics. This Appendix A gives them the basics and shows how incredibly busy ACS is, all the great things that they're doing, a lot of the great things that they're doing, and in one nice, easy, understand page. And we thought that was probably needed. Yeah.
And if somebody wants to do a deeper dive, then they can certainly do it based on if certain information that's on here, then they can do a deeper dive in that specific.
Exactly.
Great job, guys.
Well, good teamwork.
All right. We could have everybody remute, and then any other questions or comments? Rita.
Thank you. First, I want to say that it's obvious, all of the input that we see here, that a lot of work went into it. And kudos to the ad hoc committee for creating these. I really absolutely love the infographic. I think that that's going to be great for us to send to our council people for, they can just put it in their newsletter. And the fact that it is in Spanish, thank you, District 4. Residents will definitely appreciate that. My councilwoman in particular. I think that we need to think about whether or not we need some more time. If the intent is to make this a Word document that is not going to change. I think we have to think as a board, do we want to take more time to look at those following appendix and really go over them and then make a decision at the January meeting? Or if we are ready to say, this is it, I'm not going to make any changes, because I think that my feeling is if it is something that is not going to require, if we can just plug it in once we make it and decide that we're going to make it a permanent Word document, it's going to be easier for staff. So do we need time to go over it in order to assess that we're ready to make it a permanent Word document and not ask for any changes? I mean, I'm throwing it out there for discussion.
Now, I want to just comment on that one. Absolutely, we want to be able to make this as timeless as possible. Now, my recommendation is just by nature of management, over time things do change, and so I'm not saying let's create the impression that we can't change things, but let's look at the next year or 2 years
Right.
to say, is this what we need? Now, minor tweaks we can make it along the way, but the intent, and I appreciate the board and executive and especially the ad hoc who paid close attention to this time that would be to make these adjustments. And so just as we look at this, we do want to look at it in the future. If I'm missing something, I'd like it to be now's the time that we make those adjustments versus asking for those adjustments to be made during kitten season.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about that. I mean, Rita, a good point. We talked about the, maybe getting kind of a feel from the board on the kinds of the areas that we're focused on in these monthly statistical reports, because we still will be getting the quarterly and the annual reports. And then if there's like something that we really believe we have a burning need to see in one of these more frequent reports, start identifying that April, May, so Heber and his team have plenty of time to bring that in for the next fiscal year. I mean, as that was kind of maybe our thought. Or at least if we're going to get an input that, gosh, we really do need to include this one area, getting that to Heber and his staff pretty soon so they can make those changes now. And then we look at it for the next year. We just see if there's something else that we really need. And then they have a little bit of time to figure out the best and the easiest way to get that so they can present it to us.
For administrative purposes for this meeting, I would ask the direction. I would like to ask the direction of the board as for where we go, like for next month and the month after that. But we can always bring it back to if we say this is great and everybody looks at it and says this is helpful for now. I have no problem of I guess it's January, coming back and just throwing in the last question and just saying, does this work? Does this still work? But if I can get some direction.
So Heber, from an administrative point, do we want to, our decision is whether or not we want to take a vote to, agree to these provisions? What are we thinking?
So if you are able to look at it now, and if you are comfortable based upon the review, we can always do it now, and then we can work with our if the executive committee wants to put it back on as a follow-up item on the next meeting, just to be able to make sure that's a good way. But if we don't make a decision, then me sending the information, then there's no way for us to be able to test the system.
Okay, so ready to go ahead and take a vote tonight on this?
Hold on, we've still got some more comments. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with everyone that I really like this monthly report. It's a great snapshot because of the complexity of work that goes on with ACS and the way it's simplified. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of it. One of the things that I would recommend in waiting till January is we're going through the holidays. I think we want everybody to really be impacted by this. One of the reasons why it's kind of selfish on my part to wait is I think the your ACS advisory board, I think all of you are the model for other boards and commissions. There are so many reports that don't come out of every advisory group or commission or board. And I just like the way that y'all handled the business in the short time that I've been a part of this. And I just love the way it's simplified. I love the way the data is there and it's easily understood. And I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. But if you give somebody something right at Christmas, even Thanksgiving, they'll probably see it, but they may forget that they saw it and try to recall. But I think January guarantees that you find all the little glitches that you might have not seen the first time. You want to make certain that your Spanish version is right on point because some of the language in Spanish can be interpreted more than one way. So somebody has to really be on their game so that everybody will know what the intent is. Extremely proud. I'm looking at it from this advisory board being a model for other advisory boards because not all boards report out. Thank you.
George, see you've got another question. George, you're muted.
I just have one more thing to say. When you're looking at this document and it says October 2020, and I know that the numbers are cumulative. Is there any way that we can say that so when they see the report, they know that that's cumulative?
Are you referring? Which
If I say the 8,204 requests, is that per month?
Yeah. So this is just the month of October.
Okay, so it's just monthly. It's not a cumulative
Correct.
data.
So,
Oh, okay. That's fine.
This report monthly. The detailed report is today.
Yeah, you're breaking up. So
Okay.
okay, that's fine. That's all I had.
Okay, Rita. Rita, you're muted.
George, if that was your question, maybe, if it was cumulative or not, maybe the committee could consider putting in the word monthly and just say that it is the monthly report and then under it put October so that it's clear that it is not cumulative. It is just for the month and some way to designate that. Because if you saw it and thought, is this cumulative or isn't it? Then other people are going to be looking at that also and questioning it. So that may be some change to consider for the committee.
Sure. That's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rita. George, do you have another comment?
I think that's a good idea, Rita.
Okay. Okay, good.
All right, any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing any, so a number of proposals and ideas and suggestions. One more might be to follow a model similar to what Kathy outlined for her committee, allowing all board members to email any comments or suggestions or additional questions they have to the committee working on this through Eber, the assigned staff member. And then perhaps the final, quote unquote, final version could be shown for adoption at the next board meeting.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Okay, so it does not sound like, Rita, correct me if I'm wrong, it does not sound like we're going to take any action at this time on this item either.
Correct.
So I'm going to jump in. So like, for instance, we're not testing it to see if we're comfortable with it by providing that information on monthly or. Or am I just, for the next 2 months, are we just collecting input based upon the October reports in this document and based upon future thoughts?
That was what I was hearing from the group, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
This is Cindy. I would like to, Heber, if we could, I think, you know, it's one thing to see it static, but I think that getting the report, for example, the cumulative report, the Appendix C, you know, through November, and then the infographic updated for November data, I think that might help the board to see if there's other areas that maybe they'd like to recommend some refinements. So Heber, could we go ahead and start producing these reports as they are right now with those updates that have been identified, and let the board, maybe that'll spur some other comments from the board members?
I can do that.
Okay.
So basically, because it'll be 2 months before we meet again.
Yes.
So before we meet again, I will send you an updated version for October or November in December. And then right before the next board meeting, I'll send you the December data in preparation for a final discussion in January.
Okay.
Heber, one comment, if we publish these for the November and December, I think it might be a good test before it's voted on in January, so that if the public sees it and maybe they start having questions, then that might be something that can be considered in January. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But are we going to start putting these reports out, particularly the Appendix A, out to the public? Going to keep these in-house, looking over them and making decisions on what we want to add or have, you know, more explanation of?
I thought we were keeping them internal. I didn't know.
I would think keeping them internal would be maybe a better process so that we can work out any bugs or problems or issues after we've had a chance to think through these. Points well taken, Karen, that the public may have some feedback too, but I guess I'd rather that staff took a good look at them. We took a good look at them. If there's any issues that come up that staff finds in trying to prepare these on a monthly basis, that we tackle those before, you know, it goes out to the public, and then we may have some different problems to deal with. My 2 cents.
That's fine.
Sure.
Yep.
We can do that.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or concerns. Rita, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks for the report, Cindy, and for everything that's done. So having heard all the items on the agenda, the time is 7:55. Our next scheduled advisory board meeting is January 20th. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Belmore, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a
Karen Spear, I second it.
Can I to you, Chase, for the wave roll call, please?
Oh, sorry. I stayed on mute. Man, I made it the whole meeting without messing that up. Right at the end. Tripped crossing the finish line. So we will waive the roll call vote and take a voice vote here. All those in favor, unmute your microphone and please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Sorry, go ahead and mute. Okay, any opposed? I think it's George. Okay, sorry. Any who oppose, unmute your microphone and say nay. Not hearing any, the ayes have it, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season.
Happy holidays.
Everybody stay safe and happy holidays.
Yes.
Happy holidays. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care.